usual today.
I'm gonna announce we're going live.
All right.
Alrighty. So we're going live on YouTube.
You gonna put a link on your X so I can copy it and paste to mine?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I thought I just did.
Okay, I don't see it yet. Yeah, Twitter.
All right, there we go.
Okay.
All right, there's construction going on outside. Let me just shut my door quick.
Yeah, no problem.
Alrighty, let's get started. How are you doing today, Peter?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Glad to hear you're feeling a little better now.
Yeah, this time of the year, it's still a bit of a cough, but at least I can. The main thing is my head is clear, which is great. So.
Glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. So, the first thing I wanted to talk to you today about is going to be the Citadel lawsuit and the CAT system. And then we're going to get into the SEC here a little bit. But what are your thoughts about Citadel trying to do this lawsuit and again delay the CAT system? And why do you think that they're so afraid of the CAT system going live?
I mean, and this is interesting because you've been talking about cats for the last 2 years, and you got a lot of pushback saying, it doesn't mean anything. I think cats is essentially the short killer. I mean, it really is the audit trail that we need and we want. And the fact is that Hester voted against implementing it immediately. And the biggest issue now, the SEC has been dawdling on this thing for over a decade, as far as I understand it. Now that it's actually viable, it's who's going to fund it? And the SEC doesn't have the budget to run it, so they're trying to foster it onto the investment industry. So this is what's basically been the contention is, well, Citadel's going to say, why should I pay for the cop that's going to look to arrest me? So I can see them trying to again, as you said, it's a delaying tactic if nothing else. But it does raise the question of who should be paying for this. Now, it's like if you consider FINRA, now again, FINRA, who funds FINRA? Well, it's the investment community. It's supposed to be, guaranteeing that they act in a way that's beneficial for the industry in terms of public relations. So, it's like the investment industry should be wanting to prove that they are good, entities and that they are doing everything correctly. The same reason you hire an auditor is so that an auditor can give you a clean bill of health. Now, the auditing community has been compromised, and from Enron, we know that Arthur Andersen was co-opted, and who knows what every crypto firm and their dog is trying to find a compliant auditor so they can pretend that they actually have a viable business. So, and in this case, it's like, CATS is really going to stop a lot of the shenanigans that have been going on. At least provide a paper trail, like a blockchain. Here's every ticket has been issued. Here's what happened with this trade, and you can no longer hide that you're hypothecating 10 extra shares on the actual real one. So insofar as that's going to change the industry ecosystem on how to exploit the settlement system, I think it's huge. And so yeah, like Citadel probably would say, well, we don't want this to happen soon, if at all, and so instead we're going to try and delay it. But again, the contention is that this is SEC wants this, we don't want this. They should, if they were trying to portray themselves as the upstanding entity they are, then they should be saying, yeah, okay, we'll chip in and pay for this. So now they're trying to say, no, we don't want to pay for it. So like it's like from a PR standpoint, it just proves that they're trying to hide something. But the other side of the coin is SEC has been starved for funding. And whether you laugh at Gary Gensler being useless because he doesn't have enough coffee money or whatever, it's like the progressive administrations in Washington have starved the SEC for whatever reason, and we can just point to the various officials in the House and the Senate that seem to get beneficial sponsorship from industry leaders in the financial community. So yeah, I think it's not too hard to see why the SEC's been starved. But ideally, someone should pay for this. And I said, if they can either force the investment community to do it, and if the courts agree with that, then yes, you're screwed off Citadel. But in the meantime, even the best case scenario for us, CATS is going to be delayed again because of this lawsuit. So it's frustrating, but we all know that this is the most dangerous thing that we talked about. Like I said, phase 6 with ISDAs, there's still a lot of grandfather stuff that has to clear out. The switching from LIBOR to SOFR, all that stuff takes time. The CAT system would have been, it's operational, it's functional. It just can't. It's not. It's expensive to maintain. So that's the holdup now. But once it goes live for real, I mean, it's going to change things. So it's one of those things.
And like you said too, it's like they have no problem paying for things like the CNS program, things that allow them to manipulate the market. But the second it comes to showing that they're not doing it, now they can't afford it, they don't want it. It's just such a joke.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're completely scared of this because it's like when this goes live, they can track the entire life cycle of the trade. It's not just at one time; it's 3 different times throughout the whole life cycle. And then attached to that is a venue ID, so they'll know every single time when it was internalized, where it was. And one of the things that drives me nuts is how did they not have date and time stamps yet on trades? Something as simple as that should already be in the system.
You would think so, eh? Yeah, I mean, well, how does Virtue not have a log of who's using their customer data, right? So,
well, yeah, that blows my mind. And then they up the users.
Yeah. I mean, it's so self-serving when you see it. I mean, it's not even, they're not even being like, it's obvious, right? So it's just like, this is how obnoxious they are. And this is why the industry needs to be better regulated, because they won't do it for themselves, even though it's in their best interest in the longer term. But I mean, we'll get off topic, but you just see like Deutsche Bank paying $75 million to Epstein victims, and this is after J.P. Morgan has funneled how much money into that. So it's like, yeah, they're just like, it's so crass. But you would think that again, from a public relations point of view, if you're really trying to be an upstanding, financial industry leader, then you would happily pay for stuff that validates what you're doing. But you can't, because you're not doing things on the up and up. You want to hide stuff, so you can't be, so as soon as they're forced into it, they'll pay for it. But until then, they won't. And they'll just delay things. I just was saying, when I saw that lawsuit, though, I thought, this is going to vindicate Bigums, because you've been the biggest advocate for cats for the last 2.5 years of anyone else on the internet. So, I mean, people were giving you crap saying, oh, it's never going to happen. I mean, you can see this is dangerous. It's like, they really do not want cats. I mean, I saw it last year when Hester, basically was trying to scrap cats entirely, and they were forced to delay it. It's like, it really, like people say, well, what is the catalyst? And cats would have been the catalyst. And so I was very, when it went live, September last year, 2022, I thought, yep, this is it. And then of course it didn't go live. I mean, it's viable, but it wasn't, being administered from. So I think it's heartening, at least, that Citadel's afraid enough that they're point blankly suing the SEC. So
Yeah, and then you guys see them every other day, trying to get Gary Gensler out of there, which, that kind of leads me to my next question here. So, Gary, you just kind of went over a little bit. He always says he's handcuffed, and he's handcuffed by Congress. And then when I watched that last SEC meeting, they're talking about the rebates and getting rid of the rebate tiers, which is a big deal. And we all need to go ahead and write in on that, because that's basically payment for order flow from the exchanges to these guys. So they're getting payment for order flow on both ends.
Right.
People like Citadel, that's a massive revenue stream from them. They were getting higher and higher revenue or rebates because they were using them more, so they got higher tiers. So if we take that away, that adds competition to the market, adds it to the exchanges. So you're not going to have these, one or two exchanges where all the liquidity, all the concentrations going. You'll have it throughout all of them, that's already a big thing. You take money away from Citadel. But going into that, my question is, with Gary going after, these market makers, because he can't just, we all want him to go in there and just kick the door down. He obviously can't do that. Congress isn't going to let them. So the next best thing he can kind of do is go after their business model and their revenue and their power in the market. And it seems like he's kind of doing that by going after the, payment for order flow through the auction system, going after their rebates. You see, they're getting in lawsuits every other day now with Citadel, Virtue. I'm just kind of curious, I talked to Dave about it, and he said, he sees a different change with this SEC compared to a lot of other ones, and actually actions taking place. But he goes, a lot of people don't understand a lot of these take, like a year to get going. It's just how government is. Obviously we want him to go faster. But my question is what do you think about Gary? Do you think he's trying to help retail? Do you think he's trying to, just do enough? Do you think he's shackled by Congress? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I've been through such an evolution in regards to this, because I went into it thinking, so Gary is a Democratic insider. He was Hillary Clinton's finance campaign manager, so he's very politically connected. He's been in and out of private industry. His career trajectory suggests he wants to be basically the next Treasury Secretary. Ultimately that would be sort of he doesn't want to be an elected official, but he wants to be like in the inner circle. And so I went in seeing him come in. I thought, okay, this guy is going to Joe Biden is claiming to be like the people's president. And I mean, we all seen how that's all evolved, but I would have thought that Gary Gensler was going to go after, Republican friendly scalps on Wall Street. So, when I made my post on LinkedIn 2.5 years ago, I was saying, like, come on, SEC, here's your prime target. Ken Griffin is like a Republican. I mean, obviously he donates to the Democrats too, but he was primarily a Republican donator, and he's benefiting off the lax enforcement. So come on, SEC, get your act together. And I couldn't understand, like, the GameStop report came out, and it's like, what a whitewash piece of crap. Obviously there was more to it than what you guys have cited. It's like, oh, I've only been in the job 3 months. I've only been in the job 6 months. John Stewart, I'm sorry, I don't have enough money. We can't even afford coffee. It's like one thing after another, and it's like, what's going on, Gary? Like, and then you can see the various Republican hacks in the Senate, and he just got funded by Ken Griffin, or it's clear that he did run into opposition from the other party. But that being said, there could be made a case, and as things dragged on, and I watched what had happened to AMC, and it's like, you've got to be kidding me. How blatant is this? And I started to wonder, I had this pet theory back in 2021 in June that, Adam Aron was sort of encouraged to facilitate providing those shares to the shorts at the time he did, just because Gary Gensler at the SEC were sort of watching over things and didn't want a market implosion because of what happened with GameStop in January. Could have as the head of Interactive Brokers, I cannot remember his name right now. He said in January 21, he said, look, if GameStop had been allowed to run, it would have been market catastrophe. So when AMC ran in June of 2021, I thought, well, we don't know. Now we know, even that back then it was a big play. and just how big a play it's been is because you can just see what's happened over the last 2 years. But so I thought, okay, Adam may be encouraged by the SEC to sort of stop and halt whatever the gamma squeeze that was happening, because it was a gamma squeeze. It wasn't actual squeeze. If you look back at what was going on in 2021, it was Mudrick that was caught offside with their calls. They were selling naked calls, and they gave him 20 million shares, and they sold them the next day, and they were so cocky that they didn't even think they hedged their option short. So anyway, a lot of that run up from like whatever 15 up to say 60 was Mudrick. So it wasn't really a squeeze, but I thought Adam's playing like. Providing these shares. And I don't know if that's true or not. After 2 years, I'm still not sure what to make of it. But I always thought the SEC was sort of de facto behind the scenes trying to manage this thing. And again, you had all in hindsight, we can see all the sort of YouTubers that were like, I tended to watch, Bald Man from New York for a while, because I thought he was being fed inside information. I thought he was being fed inside information from someone, because sometimes he had some very interesting points. But, that led me to think, this is a managed event, and the SEC is behind it, and the SEC is trying to fire extinguish it, try and moderate the damage. And so I've been watching things going. When is the SEC going to do? When is the Department of Justice investigation into short selling going to manifest? And when are we going to see some arrests? And as time's gone on, and we just saw what happened with AMC over the last year with Ape, and how Ape was basically seller boxed, and it's like, this is absurd. It's like, how many FTDs did you have on the first day? 55 million Ape. What was the price action in Ape on the first day? How many halts? And we can name a plethora of incidents in the last 2 years where like the trading in AMC has been obscene, like manipulation beyond belief, and yet there's no action from the authorities. So Gary Gensler, what the hell are you doing? You're not blind, and so why didn't you act, or why haven't you acted? And it's a mystery to me. So I started to think, well, if I'm more critical of Gary, maybe not that I have that much influence, but I do know that for at least the time in 2021, I had the Department of Justice reading all my LinkedIn posts. So I do know they were paying attention. So I don't know exactly what Gary's plan is here, or if he has a plan, or if he's been doing anything behind the scenes. I will agree with Dave that it is, in terms of like some of the proposals that are coming out, it's long, they're long overdue, and it does feel like they're resource constrained. So they're picking their targets. And people talk about, SEC went after Beyonce. Okay, they're kind of some spurious kind of wins. Like, it's like, we what's an easy win for us? Like, just for a PR win. And a lot of these small lawsuits that they've gone after, we arrested this guy, or who is this guy? It's like, he scammed 13 million. It's like, come on, let's get the big fish. I think it really cuts the case of, as you said, they can't really go in and take down Citadel very easily. What they can do, and that we saw this with Virtue, right? It's like, it just like Virtue is so cocky, they didn't bother to create infrastructure to they're sharing customer data, and they don't have any kind of adequate, like, it's like Al Capone being sued for tax evasion. That's basically what you have to do. You have to find a weak spot for these guys that they haven't really paid much attention to. In Virtue's case, it's their infrastructure. And it's like, you guys are violating market confidentiality. I mean, it's like, we know they're doing much more worse than that, but we'll go after what we can. And so that's what I think is happening, is Gary is trying to get scalps, because it is coming into an election year, and the Democrats have been floundering. So he is trying to find some wins, but he's limited in what he can do. So he's basically going after what he can, and this transparency proposal is a good thing. And again, it's kind of sad that he's saying, in 2008 we were tasked to do this. We finally did it 15 years later. That's not really a great that's not a great PR win, but at least he's he's accomplished something. So in a sense, like, if I'm Gary Gensler, it's like, I've been in the job 4 years or 3 years now. I got to show that, the guys in Washington, Biden's administrators or handlers, or whatever you want to call them, want to see something from me. And they probably want to see more. And perhaps maybe that's what we're having to wait for is, as we've seen, the White House has weaponized the Department of Justice. I won't go into this stuff with Trump, but I mean, it could be that maybe a short selling investigation might not, they have some meat. Maybe they have a lot of meat, but maybe they're not going to execute it just yet. Maybe they'll wait for the political cycle to get even more intense. So I mean, that's speculation on my part, but I would hope to see something coming. So anyway, I think it's a case where Gary Gensler is not necessarily our friend totally, but I think he is trying to enhance market regulation as much as he can, because it makes him look like he's actually accomplished something, because ultimately he is a political animal and wants to basically advance, and he can't advance if he's, you look at the CFTC, and there's Rostin Benham is the head commissioner there, and he's an absolute, like, I hate him because he snuffed the silver rally in 2021. But aside from that, he's just an ineffective administrator. He hasn't done anything. CFTC,
yeah, he just postpones everything or gives exemptions out anytime they're going to make rules on anything.
Exactly. So he's a total hack, and he's bought and paid for by the investment industry, right? So, I have no respect for Rostin Benham whatsoever. At least I have a little bit of respect for Gary, as for using what he can to sort of make some kind of imprint, because he needs to. So I mean, that's where it is. It's complicated. As Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, and of course his linkages with FTX, there's no illusions for me that Gary is not compromised by the very system he works in. He's not. I mean, he may be a nice guy in person, but he's no paladin, I guess what I'm saying. It's like he's got his hands dirty, and he's just playing a political game here. And insofar as that political game may help retail, that's a good thing. But there's a long way to go.
Because you got to think too. I mean, we're exposing so much stuff, but just on your point earlier too with Virtue, he also did go after Citadel for the same exact type thing. You got to remember, he's going after that other lawsuit with them as well, where they had employees that were starting up other firms, and they still had access to Citadel's information. So while they were getting funding for those firms, and while those firms were starting up, they were using Citadel's information to get going and get a head start out of everything.
Yeah, I had forgotten that, and I didn't know as much as you did on that. Like, I'm not shocked, but it's like, yeah, it's disgusting. So
yeah, they're all doing it. All those market makers, they all have stuff where everyone just got access to information. They just charge them fees. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, and this, I mean, we're going to go a little off topic here, but this is what galls me. So all this stuff with FTX going on, and yet Brett Harrison is sitting there on the sidelines, not even, like, he is so involved in this. Don't tell me he wasn't involved in this. I mean, he was a CFO for several months before he quit. And of course, he's blocked me. Of course, he blocked most of us when we started pointing out he should be in jail. But he basically, said on several streams, or at least one stream I'm aware of, that all these stock tokens were back one for one. And we know they weren't, because the supposed custodian in Germany said, like, we have severed relationship with FTX a year ago. We do not have any stocks related to these tokens. So for better part of 2022, if they were having tokens trading, they weren't backed by anything. And so Brett Harrison, as a CFO at the time, would have known that. And so he outright lied. And SBF, lied too, but that's not a shock. So, like, it drives me crazy. But the point is that Brett Harrison used to be this algo trader at Citadel. So, I mean, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that he was in communication with Citadel while all this was going on. And how much communication, what kind of information was exchanged, I don't know, but my imagination runs wild. And so, yeah, Gasparino would call me a conspiracy theorist on this, but I don't think it's a stretch. I don't think it's a stretch at all that Citadel was very aware with what FTX was doing, and was benefiting from it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously those things weren't backed by anything, but the thing that's funny is that they all said they ran off. If you really look at the the whole thing, it's basically like he did Huang's Archegos scheme. Everything was running off total return swaps. And then they were supposed to be backed by securities, by CM Equity. But when you go and read CM Equity saying, because this is the thing that they tried to do. And this is like today, I was like, why didn't CM Equity, why did their doors get kicked out? Why aren't they in trouble? But then when you go ahead and you read their thing, They're basically like, we're the brokers in this situation, so we don't transfer them ourselves. We send the orders to, it was like Interactive Broker, or I can't remember the other ones, like AVG Canada or something, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they sent them over to there. So basically, they're like, they tried to do the old bullshit. Well, it wasn't us. It's their fault. They're our customers. They do what they want to do with their, but we just saw a lawsuit the other day where they're finally holding, brokers accountable for what their customers
that's really huge. I mean, I see people say, this is Citadel's getting off scot-free. It's like, well, you know what? In my mind, the brokers are as big a problem at this point. I mean, there's no, I was willing to give, Ken Griffin a pass if we can at least get some of these big brokers to go down. It doesn't mean I don't think Ken Griffin's arch criminal here, right? It's just like, let's be realistic. I want this whole broker liability for the customer stuff. Yeah, this is huge. Like, these brokers cannot get off saying, "Oh, like, I was following orders, sir." Yeah, sorry, you're contributing to massive financial destruction, and you're a criminal as well. You should take some liability for it. So, it is very important that brokers be held accountable for what their customers are doing. So, in that sense, CM Equity, again, they said, "Oh, we had nothing to do with FTX after January 2022 or January 2021 or whatever the date was." But their involvement is somewhat, it's like, oh yeah, we wash our hands of it. Well, yeah, how did you know what was going on beforehand though? While you were still involved with them. So, the problem is,
go ahead.
I was just saying, the problem is that FTX blatantly lied about so many things. You don't know if someone was just conned by him or not, or whether they all knew he was a bullshit artist and just pretended to be taken surprise. Like Kevin O'Leary, right? It's like, oh, I had no idea his parents were so reputable. Oh, please, his dad was asking for $1 million because he wasn't happy with his $200,000. It's like, yeah. The more this thing goes on, the more disgusting it all gets, and so everyone that was involved at FTX is tainted. So don't tell me Brett Harrison wasn't involved. So, and it's like, you can block me, Brett Harrison, but mind you, someday someone will look into his participation, and he was too involved not to have dirty hands.
No, I agree. I mean, I got that interview up right now on my YouTube, but I just put the link for it. But yeah, I mean, dude, that whole thing was just obviously so. See, this is the thing, because I was telling everybody this could be an atom bomb for retail when that lawsuit came, because when CMKM Diamonds went through, they won the lawsuit, but they didn't know who to have them do the payment on the lawsuit. Nobody was really held liable, and they kept getting passed back and forth of who was liable. So nothing ever truly happened with it. But now the fact that these retail, or these brokers can be held accountable, like I was saying to everybody else, this could be a big thing because it could lead to discovery. Because what this lawsuit would do is it would say, all right, we come in together, we do a class action lawsuit, we hand these brokers for this time period, because eventually they'll do an update and they'll say, hey, we're not liable if you hit I accept, we're not liable for what our customers do, blah, blah, blah. Or they'll try something. Maybe that won't work because a court said they still are.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what the court said. It's like they made an argument, and we can't be held. I beg to differ. You are liable, and that was interesting. That judge, I don't know if that can be appealed. So that's the next question, is whether that ruling will be appealed. But it was very, very comforting to see that the judge actually said, "I'm not putting up with your bullshit." So yeah, we need more of that.
Yeah, and I think so for retail, for us, we might want to actually look into that, because what they would do is say, all right, it was talking about using it for spoofing. It was talking about using it for manipulation. So what it said is if you sell these orders to these guys and they use it incorrectly, you're liable. So that means if we sold, let's say, Fidelity, that means that they would now have the discovery phase, legally discovery phase, to go into Citadel and say, I need to see what you did with all of these Fidelity orders from this time period to this time period. And that leads to true discovery. And that is something we've needed. And that's what I'm saying. Retail, I feel like if we got together and we truly sued some of these brokers, number one, we get to the discovery phase that we've all wanted since we've got into this. Number two, if these guys are liable and they know these guys are going to keep committing crimes, it incentivizes them to get more away from payment for order flow and go straight to exchanges.
Yeah. Well, I just saying, ironically, I'm thinking, oh, well, we'd asked for discovery that said, oh, we can't find the records, oh, we misplaced, buys or sells or whatever, how'd you, oh, it was a programming error. It's like, oh, we're going to take years to figure it out. This is why CATS is necessary, right? It's like this is bullshit. So
that's exactly what Virtue's doing with the iron workers. That's exactly what they're doing. All the stuff they needed, they're suddenly like, we won't give it to you. We can't find it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so predictable.
Oh, yeah. So all of that kind of leads into my next thing, actually. So we know there's going to be a hearing now with the top CEO of the banks with the Banking Finance Committee. And apparently they're going to probe them all up and all that. And that's in December. And we find out that, Patrick McCain, he's basically the head of that. He's getting paid by Virtue, Citadel, all these guys to lobby against all these rules. Do you think that this kind of leads back into, buddy, please stop. This kind of leads back into what we were going on with before. Hold on, baby. Sorry, he's like moving my chair and stuff. So this leads back to before we were talking about with, is Gary kind of, handcuffed, because this guy now they're trying to get into speaker. So you see the corruption level above him going higher and higher and higher. But do you think this is another just gong show committee thing to put on an act, or what do you think about this?
Yeah, just like the GameStop commission or whatever, the three hearings, Maxine Waters, Ken Griffin looked like he committed perjury. It's like, but did anything really happen? Gary promised a report. The report was kind of whitewashed. The only thing that came out of that was that Gabe Plotkin looked like an idiot, and that Roaring Kitty was funny on national television and then disappeared. So, any finance committee thing, especially if McHenry gets the speaker, it's going to be neutered. I mean, it's, as I said, it's going to heat up because we're getting into the major part of the political cycle. So it may be that like Gary doesn't sit down and die. Maybe there's powers that we're not aware of that might scupper the speaker for quite some time. And it's like it's not a guarantee that Kenny's choice will get in. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to expect from it, other than I'm being cynical and just not expecting much. But I do think that, and I posted a song like John Farnham's "Where You're the Voice," and all our, as I said, all pointing out all this stuff, the corruption, being loud about it on social media. I mean, the mainstream media can ignore it or write FUD articles about AMC all day, but I think people on the internet that do read a lot are basically cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of corruption in Wall Street, and you can only whitewash like how many hundreds of millions can JP Morgan pay so that Jamie Dimon doesn't have to sit in a disposition and admit that he perjured himself. I mean, how much like can you do that without, people are basically becoming aware. So the more that this is pointed out on social media, more people are becoming aware. Eventually it becomes politically tenable to sort of like, hey, there's political points to be made by going after, people in Congress that are being like bought. And I saw this Gates guy, Republican, like guy that's screwing up the speaker process. I mean, he's trying to argue for 12-year term limits and no insider no stock trading. I think that's the kind of guy that's trying to play this momentum. He's seeing that there's a lot of anger and disaffection in the populace with the crap that's going on in Washington. So there's political points to be made by trying to cater to that. And I think as more and more people see this and see the Occupy Wall Street was interesting because it was loud, but it didn't really, it was like a bunch of wackos in Wall Street. It wasn't a huge populist thing, even though it probably did reflect the view of a lot of people. It didn't really have enough of an impact politically. But I think, this is why I'm sort of watching Robert Kennedy Jr. because he's trying to tap into that, and going by independent now. He had no choice. I think Joe Biden's the Democratic National Committee wasn't going to let him have any kind of voice, so he had no choice to go to independent. But now that he is, his only option is to try and play off the sort of Main Street anger. So I've been watching his sort of posts on X, because I think there's other politicians that are starting to come around and see the potential leverage, just because Washington and Wall Street are so disgustingly corrupt right now. It doesn't take a lot to see it. And as I said, mainstream media doesn't play it up much, but you just like the number of stories that are coming out. It's like, and I'm sorry, my just disgust level, like the JP Morgan stuff with Epstein is bad enough, but it's just the whatever, Dianne Feinstein, rest her soul. I mean, she was in whatever Congress for how many years, 20 years, on a salary of 130 or whatever, 150,000 a year, and yet her estate is worth 200 million. I mean, come on, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out how she did that. So I think there's too much of that. There's way too much of that. And people don't want to leave Congress now because it's a gravy train. It's like, I'm seeing more and more people just say, like, they're not going to retire, because why would they? They get inside information, they can make stock trades and become rich that way. So it's like, why would you ever want to leave position? And you've got, like, Mitch McConnell, who's I don't even think he's functional. And you get Joe Biden, who's got, signs of dementia. It's like, but they're not going to retire. And this is the thing. I think people are seeing this and like, what the hell's happened to the U.S.? I mean, I can say what the hell's happened to Canada too. It's just as bad in some respects. So I mean, it is. There's a lot of public anger, and I think you're going to see more and more people try and make political points to cater to that. And so these guys, these fat cats in Congress, and McHenry, and wants to basically suckle at the Wall Street seat. I mean, at some point, it's going to backfire against him.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I was showing people this the other day. It's like, you have all these celebrities that have been in movies and stuff, and you're sitting there like, God, these guys got to have hundreds of millions of dollars, and they'll only have like 30, 40 million, which that's a fuck ton of money. But then you look at these politicians, they all have hundreds of millions. So you act like it, in your mind, you're like, that's not even that much. Then you have certain CEOs that have billions, and then they throw trillions around, and it's like programming in your mind. Trillions aren't that bad, when really trillions should be unheard of, but they're thrown around like candy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go off topic too much, but like Janet Yellen said earlier this week, yeah, we can fund 2 wars, no problem. It's like, yeah, you can, because you have no sense of fiscal restraint. There's no fiscal restraint. So Jay Powell says, yeah, at some point the current fiscal path is untenable. Yeah, Jay Powell, thanks for Captain Obvious. I mean, it's already untenable. You're already paying too much in interest. You can't afford Social Security. I mean, you basically, at some point, the only thing the budget will cover is interest payments, and that means you won't have money for military or Social Security or anything else. Or it's just this disgusting. So like, oh, what's our solution? We'll just print more money. This is inflationary. Oh, but we're the reserve currency, so we can get away with it. But at some point, you won't be able to get away with it. And so this is why on X, I tend to put a lot of posts from people like Gold Telegraph and Wall Street Silver, because there's stuff happening that's indicative that the U.S. dollar as the mainstay currency is being actively trying to be undermined. If you look at what's happened with Treasury yields in the last few months, it's like China has probably contributed to that. They are selling their Treasury holdings. They are buying gold and silver. They are stockpiling. They are talking about having a gold-backed bond market. And in that sense, yeah, like, would you rather have a debt that's backed by some real collateral, or would you the full faith in the U.S. government? Well, the full faith of the U.S. government isn't worth a lot right now, and it's getting worse. So, I mean, there's things that just the U.S. administration is blithely assuming that the dollar will remain the reserve currency. And I agree that it's not in any immediate danger, but there's so many signs that it is under attack. And the thing with currencies is it's fine until it's not, and then when it's not, it's a big collapse. So my concern is that if you think you can afford 2 wars, and you can afford all these other programs, and we're probably getting into universal income question here soon, but if you can afford all this by just printing dollars, at some point that's going to come back and bite your ass really hard.
No, I mean I agree, and I mean I'm glad you kind of went over that because it leads over my next couple things here. You're leading right into a lot of it, but so
Okay.
it's going to be kind of a long question here, but right now the U.S. budget deficit again soared to 1.7 trillion. This is the largest outside of COVID. So this is the largest spending problem we've ever had, other than when
Right.
COVID first started, which obviously that makes sense. But we can't stop spending, like you said. We always act like it's no big deal, but the way that United States works, it's just like any other business. Right now, we have, we're spending way more than we're making, and one of the things is their number one way to make money is taxes. So you can't raise taxes. You have all these other countries selling your bonds. Well, if you're not, generating revenue, the only other way is to issue these treasury notes like we're getting into. And this is what I've been talking about for the last month. The United States basically is on a death spiral. It is, because no matter what, I'm going to ask you this at the end, how to fix this, but the way it is, it's like, okay, the way that we're going now is these rates are going to keep going up. They're going to keep skyrocketing on the treasury market. Everybody's going to keep leaving the banks, as you've been seeing. We had $1 trillion. That's a lot of money. Leave deposits and go into money market funds and treasury notes. And those notes you just saw hit 5%. They're going to keep going up and up and up, because the thing is, where the United States is at is our debt's getting so riskier. You already saw we got downgraded, but the way that it is like I said, we're killing off our middle class. So one of the ways an economy can fix it is you get more companies up, get more middle class, so you can now collect more taxes. Yeah. Well, that's not an option. Instead of doing that, you're killing your middle class, and that's another reason. And you're killing these middle mom and pop shops, and that's another reason why you're not gaining these taxes. Well, another way to do it is to keep, you can just keep printing bonds, or you can print more money, but obviously in the end of the day, you're just fucking yourself with inflation. So the only other option you could do is sell these notes. Well, no one's buying them other than us, so they need to just keep jacking those rates up. Well, the only other way the country can make money is war. And that's why I believe we're in these wars, because that's the only way right now currently the United States has to generate this, that always, generates your economy. Now, and then you can obviously issue these debts, and now you got that debt as collateral, and you'll always act like, oh, we got this debt as collateral, but just like the banks, you'll go and you'll use that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it is so you're right. It's a death spiral, and it was kind of inevitable. Like, I've been saying this for 5 years now. It's like there's too much debt in the world. You need a productivity miracle, and or inflation, because you need to either grow your income dramatically through productivity, or you need to inflate that debt away through inflation,
or cut expenses in half. And they're not going to do that.
Yeah, that would be the more painful way, is to just like be fiscal, call it fiscal austerity, and parts of Europe tried that. It crushes the economy, and it says it basically by doing that you actually slow growth. So you don't want to cut expenses. You want to basically try and use the revenue, and instead of giving everyone money to go play, stay at home and play Nintendo, you want to develop technology that makes things more efficient. So I was thinking that, well, there was some productivity gains, like having China be the manufacturing hub lowered costs. So globally, the world was better off as production shifted from expensive North America to Asia. It wasn't good for the North American economy. It was good for China. So that was the one thing, is like, the global wealth increased during like the Clinton era, because China's GDP was growing dramatically. So China became richer. The world became richer, but it wasn't distributed very well. It was, again, benefited China more than anyone else. So, but then you reach a point where those gains stopped. There was only so much, there wasn't. China is very good at taking stuff and copying it. They're not very good at innovating and creating their own stuff. And Japan was very good at taking stuff and making it better, but Japan's been slow, because the demographics are such that their entire population is aging very quickly, and they're not the innovation source they used to be. So U.S. the one strength of the U.S. has always been is its innovation, and and that's been stifled. As you said, the middle class has been killed off. The ability to advance, the great American dream, has been stifled because it becomes more and more harder to get to that point where you can hit that you see, for example, we can labor into the short sellers here. It's like, I'm an entrepreneur. I have a great idea. I want to create this company. Oh, it's got a cure for cancer. But I need to go public. But I can only get financing from this kind of shady guys. Oh, now they're short. They own my bonds, and now they're short selling my stock. I can't raise any more capital. They're going to force me bankrupt. But I've got a cure for cancer. But I can't use it because can't develop it. So a lot of the innovation in the U.S. has been stifled by the financial terrorism, and I don't mind you using that word because it is. Like, these short sellers are out of control. And so anyway, the innovation aspect of the U.S. is stifled. Middle class can't grow. The middle class is being shrunk. There's a lot of wealth sitting in the 1%, and that's why Biden is talking about billionaires tax again, right? Taxing 25% of billionaires' income. But will that ever happen? I don't. It's like, how political viable is that? Because if you're owned by the 1%, I mean, Kenny's got to buy half of Florida, right? He can't be taxed 25%. So anyway, where is the U.S. going to get the money to pay for all this? And it's just like, at some point, it's like any kind of, like, the U.S. is like a hedge fund out of control. It's like, at some point you can't like, the productivity gains are not going to happen. AI I thought might be, but AI has been overhyped, way overhyped, and that's another story. NVIDIA is probably overhyped. But if you can't get the gains from productivity because of technology gains haven't really materialized as much as you need, you got to inflate. And so that your dollar is worth more today than it's going to be down the road. So you want to basically borrow as much as you can today, and then you basically can pay it off because you've inflated your debt away. So in this sense, what Biden and Yellen are doing is quite obviously the logical point of view. If in kind of game playing, it's like, yeah, we'll just borrow as much as we want now, and yeah, we'll finance wars, and this will negotiate. This aid is not like hands-free. It's like Ukraine is basically giving away all their agricultural capability to U.S. Multinationals, right? As far as I understand, like, Monsanto and all these guys are buying up Ukraine farmland, or at least getting leases on the land for hundreds of years. I don't know the exact details, but that's what I've sort of been hearing. So yeah, like the wars, not only do they suit the U.S. geopolitically because sort of supporting Ukraine is draining Russia. I don't know how long they can keep this up. If neither side is willing to compromise, I do not see like Ukraine being able to. Like I said, I'm not pro Russia by any means, but I don't see Ukraine being able to. If they haven't been able to do it now, when Russia's on the backs, Russia's retooling their industries. Russia's getting ammunition from North Korea as a stopgap. Russia's been able to, sell its oil despite the embargoes. Russia has, issues, but I do not know if they're, basically going to get taken out by this Ukraine war. It's not going to kill them, and it's just going to slow them down. But this all the U.S. want to do is basically say, hey, look, we you're Russia, you're a toothless tiger. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but Russia probably has been, hurt by Ukraine, but I don't think they're going to be like. I don't think they're going to settle. I don't think they need to get something out of this, and so this thing is going to keep dragging on, but it's not going to be fatal to Russia. And meantime, the U.S. is going to basically use its aid to Ukraine to try and exploit as much advantage as it can, either in Ukraine or elsewhere. Selling new military items to NATO members. So the military-industrial complex, in so much as they do control American society, and this is thing. When you talk about the swamp in Washington, it's not so much. Well, Kenny and friends do have a lot of influence in Washington, but ultimately, let's not forget that Eisenhower in 1950 whatever warned about the industrial complex. And it's kind of funny because, well, it's not funny, but JFK came into office and he wanted to sort of push back on military influence and industrial influence, and so he made it. The Bay of Pigs was sort of botched because Kennedy interfered, and so there's a lot of, like, Robert Kennedy Jr. believes that the CIA assassinated his uncle and maybe his father, and so the Kennedys were trying to push back on the military-industrial complex and the CIA, and they became inconvenient, and they're also trying to stop on the mob. So the mob and the CIA, apparently, allegedly got together and decided to off Kennedy. So, there's a lot of influence from the military-industrial complex that can be no doubt whatsoever. It's just a question of it's very integrated into the whole ecosystem, so you don't hear about it. Just Raytheon and all these guys, McDonnell Douglas, whoever else you want to name, is like, they just have consistent military contracts. So it's in their benefit to for what they call the forever wars, right? It's like there's always going to be a conflict. All that military equipment that was left in Afghanistan, well, I mean, the military industrial complex didn't lose. The taxpayers lost all that. The industrial complex got paid by taxpayer money, and then the equipment just got left in Afghanistan. To me, that was like one of the biggest debacles I've ever seen in my entire life. And again, I try not to be too political, but like that was like Biden administration. What the hell? So anyway, all that to say is that when you're in this point where you're basically you're screwed, you might as well borrow as much as you can now, because you're gambling that you can demonetize debt later on, or you can do a reset. At some point, the entire debt problem goes away. And to Senate, I'm seeing the same thing in Canada, where the Liberal government is like, my entire life, I always supported fiscal conservatism in Canada. And so when people like bash me about, oh, look at Trudeau, it's like, yeah, like, look at Trudeau, I have nothing to do with this guy. To my mind, the Liberal government has destroyed any kind of fiscal conservatism that's possible in Canada. And so now the only thing that doesn't bother me is like Canada has basically done the same as the US and UK and Australia. So it's not like we're the only one that's done it. And I'm not saying it's an excuse, but it's like, at least if we're screwed, everyone else is screwed as well. So it's all the same game. And so, if you want to go into universal income, how is Canada going to afford this? Borrow it. Why not? I mean, there's other ways. I mean, but like you'd have to restructure a lot of how Canada currently administers its money. But the idea is, as we're going forward, and Elon Musk has talked about this, the technology revolution is going to make a lot of AI, whatever you want to say, is going to make a lot of current jobs redundant. And there's going to be a lot of people that don't have anything to do. And how are they going to guarantee some sort of basic life without social conflict? So at some point, you need to buy off the populace with some sort of guarantee of adequate living. The question is, does that destroy incentives to work hard? Do I rather want to go to university because I can just sit in my couch and play video games all day? And the answer is, there's probably going to be a disincentive to work hard, except for a certain part of the populace that wants to have a Lambo or wants to, take a trip to the moon or whatever. So there'll always be people that are willing to work hard and be creative and all that. But the question is, the major populace is, it said it's not just Canada. Europe has talked about it, Australia and all that. So it's something I'm very interested in, just to see, because it'll be a big social change for you got to account for all these people that are not going to have anything to do because AI is doing it for them. And whether that's a good or bad thing is another story. But, so anyway, I rambled on, but there's a lot of cross connections and all this. So
no, you're good. I mean, that's why I bring you here, man. That's kind of leading to my next question here too, because so we printed off 16 trillion in the last couple of years, 80% of all money. You've basically killed off your supply of making income, by taking away your middle class and leading into this. Your mom and pop shops, your middle companies are going down. Well, that's hitting you in the commercial real estate area as well. And right now, the feds are saying the number one area that they're concerned is inflation, because how can you get that under control and this leads into what you were saying. How can you get that under control when you printed $16 trillion, but everything got worse? Your innovations got worse. Your people's way of living got worse after printing 80%. It all went into those people. Now, they have 80 billion right now that people are defaulting, that's a lot. They have 80 billion in people defaulting right now on their real estate loans, and there's
Yeah.
1.5 trillion coming due in the next year. What is there a way for the United States to fix this? Do you see there's too many bubbles bursting? What do you see coming up here for the United States?
Yeah, and we talked about this in the last year or so over various space calls when I said, like, there's the world's kind of fucked. There's just too much debt. And excuse my language, but it really is a case of too many bubbles popping at the same time. Too many problems have been kicked down the road. At this, at some point, all these cans are accumulating at the end of the road, and the road ends because it just isn't viable to keep kicking it. There's a big hill in front of you, or there's a big ditch. The can's not going to go any farther. It's either going to fall off a cliff, or it's just going to bounce and hit you in the face. So you can't fix everything because it's all been kicked too far. And so, yeah, all this debt that's being defaulted on, so for example, so we had the regional bank crisis in March. So a lot of these banks, the regional banks, were exposed to huge commercial real estate loans, which were all supposed to be resetting this fall. And what happened was, they couldn't have liquidity because they were losing their deposits. Their mark-to-market losses on their bond portfolio, the hold-to-maturity bonds, were hugely underwater and continue to be underwater. The higher the rates go, there's no way to trade out of these things without taking a loss. There's been really no relief since January. You look at the Treasury curve, there really hasn't been any dramatic reversals. I think there was a brief reversal when it went to I think 430, and then dropped back down to 375 or something. But since then it's been upward march. There's been no way to lighten your bond losses. You can't trade out of it. You're stuck with this stuff. So the FDIC, in lieu of all these, we cannot possibly bail out all these banks. So once the debt ceiling issue got passed in whatever April or May was, we created the this pawn shop rule of the FDIC. You can park your bonds for us for up to a year, and we'll give you 100% value of those bonds, even though they're only worth about 60% or 50%. So all these regional banks suddenly found a liquidity source. It's like, oh, yay, we don't have to worry about flaying customer deposits. We have the FDIC giving us 0% haircut on our treasuries. Yay. So all this money came into the regional banks, and then they go to their loans and say, oh, like, you guys are like delinquent on your loan. If we can work with you, though. We don't want to lose you. We don't want to take the hassle of what people don't realize is most financial institutions do not want to take your house. They don't want to take especially they don't want to take your strip mall that's basically losing money every day. It's expensive to foreclose, and then you have to go basically auction it off, and you may get like pennies on the dollar. So ideally they want to keep you as a loan paying client. So, and once they get all this liquidity from the FDIC, it's like, yeah, okay, we can work with you. Pay us 20% of what you're supposed to, and then we'll restructure the amortization of the rest of the loans. So your 10-year loan just became a 50-year loan. Yay! So your payments are going to be much less. And of course, you can increase your payments whenever you feel like you can, but there's no rush. So all these commercial loans that were supposedly going to implode this fall, I think a lot of them have been restructured. And this is not just in commercial real estate. We're seeing this in real residential real estate in Canada. Like, again, Unusual Whales and FX Hedge and all these guys keep posting stories about in Canada. 50% of Royal Bank's mortgages have amortization periods that have grown. Yeah, so what's happened is a lot of people cannot make the monthly payments. So, okay, well, the only way to keep this loan viable is we have to change your amortization period. So, oh, you've got 20 years left? Well, we'll make it 50 years. So, oh, you stretch out those payments over 50 years. But we've talked about this before. It's like once you have these huge amortization periods, it's like this mortgage is no longer for life. It's for your whatever your inheritor's life as well, because now you got a 60-year mortgage loan. Chances are your working life is 30 years or 35 years. So you're not going to be able to pay this mortgage off in your lifetime, and that's basically what's happened. It's like these amortization loans have just grown and grown and grown, and it's beyond ridiculous. I mean, I don't even know the percentage, but it's very high. It's like 20% of Canadian mortgages now are beyond 30 years, which is the typical mortgage term. So I don't know. It's just like you're kicking the can, you're creating a new problem, and at some point, interest rates are going to be too high. Even if you kick the can, it's still going to be ridiculous. You can't make a 30-year mortgage into a 200-year mortgage. You know what I mean? So at some point, this is just going to be non-viable, and I think we're getting closer and closer to that. So yeah, if the Fed wants to stay higher for longer, but this is why you have seen Fed officials, and Powell wasn't like very clear as he never is, but some Fed officials are saying, yeah, like maybe the market has already done a lot of our work for us. Maybe we don't have to keep hiking it just yet. So the tone after Powell on Thursday was basically, oh, they're probably going to be on hold, and now people are talking about hold for the next two meetings. So this is a sense that the reason the entire market has shifted and rates have kept going up because the Fed convinced everyone that we're going to have a soft landing, no problem. Economic growth is going to be strong. But reality is inflation is well above target and will stay above target. So we need to stay higher for longer. So once the market bought into the higher for longer, all the shorts basically jumped in and said, yeah, we're going to short the crap out of this, which they've been doing. And this is why Citadel basically has been so active in treasuries. And this is why Citadel basically went to the DTCC and said, hey, we like our own account. When you like people getting all concerned about what is Citadel going to be up to, like it's just basic math. So if Citadel was using Morgan Stanley or Bank of America to do the DTCC settlement for their bond trades, well, they have to pay a licensing fee or commission fee or whatever for BOA or again whoever their agent was to handle those transactions. The more transactions you do, the more you're paying. So if Citadel is going to be way more active in the treasury market, then they want to basically avoid paying someone else to be the middleman. They want to settle the DTCs themselves. So anyone that's all concerned about, oh, what's Citadel up to? It's not necessarily directed towards screwing us over. It's like it may be that because they make so much money shorting treasuries, they have a lot of resources to do other things. But this is what that was about. So Citadel's basically been very active in treasuries because it's been a one-way street because the Fed has said higher for longer. And then we have the problem of we know China's been selling treasuries in August. We probably, when we get the data, we'll see that they were selling treasuries in September, and they're probably still selling treasuries. And then we have the possibility the Bank of Japan is selling treasuries because the Bank of Japan is under a problem because the rates in the U.S. will keep going higher. Japan's trying to keep their 10-year below a certain target. That just keeps putting pressure on the yen. And at some point, it becomes ridiculous. So they got to go in and support the yen by buying yen and selling dollars.
Peter, not to cut you off real quick, but $7.6 trillion of U.S. government will mature next year.
Right. Yeah, and who's going to buy that? I think you've been typing, on X, you've been mentioning that. Who's going to buy this stuff? And exactly, if China's selling it,
you have to raise rates a lot more.
Yeah, and so the point is here, Japan might be selling treasuries now too because they got to sell dollars to keep the yen firm, and the only way to get dollars to sell is they have to sell their treasury holdings. So there's been some confusion as to how is U.S. rates are going higher, but the DXY is actually staying relatively calm. And I think there may be some intervention going on in Japan. So, but they need to do that. They need to sell treasuries. So they're piling on to an already market that's already going higher. So do I think treasuries are going to keep going higher? Yes. People I talk to in the market tell me 5.25 is the next target and probably be quite easy to get to. Of course, guys like Jamie Dimon have been saying 7% and 8%. And, it's just,
I said that too.
Yeah. So again, what does this mean for all the debt servicing costs? And you just said the cost of rolling 7.6 trillion. You said,
yeah, 7.6 trillion next year.
Yeah. So all that will have to get refinanced at a much higher rate than it was issued at. It is inevitable, right? It's like,
or imagine worse. They say, I don't want to renew. I want the cash now.
Oh yeah, and that's it. Someone will have to buy those treasuries, and who will the buyer be? Will it be the Fed? I mean, it's like somehow, if you don't have buyers, they're going to have what they call huge tails on your auctions. It's basically mean failed auctions. So that's not a confidence booster. So they got to, it's like there's so many things blowing up, and we've been talking about this for the last year, and I said, the global economy is kind of screwed. Again, they've just kicked too many cans too many times, and I get so frustrated because I've been saying this for 5 years. It's just like it's like a hedge fund that just keeps doing stupid things because they're so screwed that they figure they got to double down on their stupidity. And that's what the entire global community has done in terms of debt. And it's like, again, I just like, I don't know if it was avoidable, but it gets worse and worse. The COVID, like I said, it was a problem before COVID. And when COVID happened, I basically sat there and go, whatever I thought was bad is going to be 5 times as bad. And so now we're sort of dealing with that 3 years after the fact. And I'm trying, like, Nutso tells me I'm too negative, and it's like I'm really trying to be positive and find things that are positive, but there's a lot of things that have to be fixed, and I don't know how we're going to fix them all.
No, I know, and that's what I've been saying. It's like, before I've been saying, like, we're just sweeping everything under a rug, sweeping it under a rug. A lot of people are noticing the pile, and they're telling them, don't worry about the pile. And then more are noticing, and eventually people are going to see this, 100-foot pile. And it's like, you got to look at how much we're already paying. Basically right now our interest on our debt is our number one payment in the United States. That's our number one expense, and it's going to get higher and higher and higher. Yeah. And like you were saying there too, with the Canadian mortgages, I just showed you 2 months ago, they had their first 90, 70-year loans, and they had to have their kids sign too, to where they would be passed on to the children if they would pass away.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's like to own a house now will be like a lifetime indenturement, and you'll have to, your kid, the only option they'll have for getting a house is to take on the parents' mortgage. Mortgages were designed to be 30 years because people had a career of about 30 years. So you basically, the idea is once you retire, you own your house. Whether you want to sell that house then and live in Miami or whatever, and whatever you do, but at least theoretically you have a house when you retire. And meanwhile, you've lived in that house your entire career. I mean, again, mobility in the U.S. suggests that people would buy and sell over their career. But the idea was that was why a 30-year mortgage was in vogue. It's like you didn't have 50-year mortgages because that would be exceeding anyone's expected working lifetime. And now that's exactly what's happening. It's like, let's extend the amortization of these mortgages. But like, okay, who's going to co-sign that? It's like, you're how are you going to pay for a mortgage for 50 years when you're only going to be working for 30? You're like, oh, well, someone else will take the mortgage over. Who would that be? Yeah, the natural assumption is it'd be your kids. So, I'm not going to go too much in my details, but I own a house, but I'm actually separated. So I live in an apartment. I'm happy renting, but like for my kid, I want her to have that house because I do not want her to go through and not be able to get financing for a house because it just, like, especially in Canada, the real estate prices are so out of whack, and I do not see. I thought there'd be a significant correction in real estate in Canada, but now with our immigration numbers, and again, the U.S. has got similar issues. So there's so many people coming into Canada that I do not see, especially in urban areas, major urban areas such as where I live. I don't see real estate prices dramatically correcting, even though incomes don't support these things. It's insane. I mean, it may be that there's a short-term correction, but as soon as housing prices fall, there'll be people sitting in cash like, oh my God, I can actually get a house. And so it's that bad. It's like people, there's a lot of people that think I'll never be able to afford a house. And that's not just in Canada. In the US, it's like, a larger portion of the younger generation. It's like, well, I was discussing this last few days ago on a space called Nutso. It's like, why younger people can't afford a house, so they're just going to waste their money on avocado toast. It's like, well, I don't why bother saving for a house? I'll never own one, so I'll use my money elsewhere. I'll travel, and that's one thing I think has been supporting the economy is like a lot of that deferred spending that used to be saving for houses, like people just giving up, and they're just like, I'd rather live for the moment. So that is why. When the U.S. economy is resilient, look at retail sales. It's like, huge retail sales number this last week that basically prompted that the rates to go higher. The Fed
just
can't
to put a number on it for you, quick, Peter. I put this up yesterday. The average house right now is $440,000 at 8.9%, and it ends up equaling around $35,000 a year just to own a house payment.
Yeah, it's that's huge, right? So the average income, like. I mean, this is true in Canada and the U.S. I'm not sure about Europe, but if you look at what's happened with housing prices over the last 20 years, they've more than doubled. I guarantee you the average income has not doubled over the last 20 years. So,
well, here, hold on a second. Let me go ahead here for a second, because you're going way ahead on me, but I have all the numbers and everything, because I was going to get into this for you. So actually, an article came out the other day. So the median homeowner now in the United States needs to earn $115,000 to afford a median home. That means that 30% of your income can't go to that mortgage. Well, on top of that, I show people that banks are now losing money from all their things giving out loans. That's another reason why they want that 20% down for that insurance. So they have that money right up front. They can go use it, do their bullshit derivatives, turn it into millions, quit, what they do. So on top of that, you need that 20% down, or you got to pay that insurance. So right now, another article came out that in 17 states, the average income actually has dropped by 2,000, or it's dropped like 2,300 a year. Now it's dropped down to 74,500. You can look at the states. If you're looking at my screen right now, you guys can see all of these and the percentage they drop. Some drop 6% in an average in that state. Now, one of the things I was going to get to and ask you is what are the things, like you were saying with the government? They like to lie, switch numbers, say we're not in a recession, blah, blah, blah. Well, they always go to the job and, the job market over here. Oh, look at everybody, the jobs are all full, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things they don't talk about is how wages and average wages are down, but people holding 2 full-time jobs are now as an all-time high. So what's happening is you have people working 2 part-time jobs or 2 jobs, because a lot of these these companies that are going under, the nicer jobs, the 75,000, the jobs people are going to college for, they're going under. So now you have people working 2 part-time jobs, so it makes the numbers, overstretched, but we're making less.
Absolutely.
Do you think the United States is in a recession?
Yeah, I think the U.S. is floating on hot air, and it like you said, there is a lot of people that are being forced to work 2 jobs because prices have gone up, and you basically are forced to do a gig economy because your basic necessities, if nothing else, have gone up by dramatic amounts, right? It's your rent or your mortgage costs have gone up, your gasoline costs, everything, your food, everything has gone up. So you're basically forced to get alternative income, or maybe you still have that good job, but now you're working a second job because the good job hasn't caught up with inflation, and it won't. In Canada, for example, in September, there were 64,000 jobs created. If you actually delve into that, though, 25,000 of it was like part-time, and 20,000 of it was self-employed. So, these are not reliable jobs. These are not like jobs with benefits. These are not jobs that have consistent pay. Like, I am self-employed. That means I could be making 100,000 a year. I could be making 2,000 a year, and so like. How should those numbers even be reported as job creation when it's like it's unclear as to what their contribution? It could be they're very valuable jobs for the person that's doing them, but it may be that they're not making much at all. And so to say, the economy's strong based on numbers like that, it's really relying on a lot of assumptions that may or may not be the case. And that's the problem with the Fed is like, oh yeah, look at these job numbers. The economy is relatively firm, but inflation is still too high. So we've got to keep hiking or keep rates high. But in his head, like that retail sales number that came out, it's like, oh, your retail consumer is doing fine. Yeah, well, look at the credit card debt. Like people point out, like look at the volume versus the cost. Is the volume actually staying up, and is the cost gone up? So you need to be more diligent in delving into these numbers, but the algos don't care. They just go off the headlines initially. So it is a question of like, is the economy is really as strong as we think it is? And I would tend to think that a lot of it's hot air. It's for the reasons you suggested. It's like people have no choice but to work 2 crappy jobs, or they're working their good job, and then their quality of life is suffering because they're spending, they're moonlighting on a crappy job just to keep up with costs. So
no, I agree. And it's funny you bring up the credit card things, because I have a tab open here that I was going to actually say this. So credit card companies, we just saw that it reached $1 trillion, but this just came out a couple days ago. Credit card companies are racking up fastest losses pace in almost 30 years because not only are we over $1 trillion now, people are defaulting on it and just not paying it at all. They don't care.
Yeah, no, and that's the point exactly. It's like, this is why I'm saying the U.S. government is starting to act like this, right? So people, like, when they get to a certain debt situation, it's like, you know what? At some point, the debt is no longer my problem; it's the bank's problem, and that's where the U.S. government is going. It's like, yeah, it's no longer our problem; it's a global problem, you know. So, and the U.S. did this. This actually happened in '71 when the U.S. went off the gold standard. Nixon's Treasury Secretary told the Europe, it's like, you know what? The U.S. dollar isn't our problem; it's your problem. You know, we can do whatever the hell we want with it. You guys have to deal with it. And that was basically the end of fiscal responsibility and the rise of fiat. Now, you had high inflation in the U.S. in the '70s because of that decision and because of OPEC and everything else. But the fiat currency is always only as good as the faith in the issuer. And the Fed, you know, had oh my God. In the '80s, they had a hawk on the Fed, who I'm mentally blanking out right now, but he basically raised rates to 18%. So that restored some faith in fiat, because it's like, oh yeah, the U.S. is willing to do some hard steps to get inflation under control. And central banks had some kind of luck in terms of, for, you know, expanding into China, having China join the World Trade Organization, China exporting deflation. So central banks looked like they actually knew what they were doing for several decades. And so they had some credibility. So even though fiat currency was not backed by anything but the faith of the issuer, people are saying, oh, the governments are trying to be fiscally responsible. But reality is, Nixon opened the door for bad behavior in the '70s. And you know, if you look at the debt ceiling negotiations that happen every few years now, it's like, it's a joke. There's no fiscal austerity. There's no sense of fiscal responsibility in the U.S. government. And why should the rest of the world be fiscally responsible either, then, when the U.S. sets an example? So the whole like, I'm very,
not to cut you off. I always like to give numbers, but just since we raised it, the debt has gone up 2.26 trillion. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no sense of, like, it's a joke. No one takes this seriously. And the fact that Moody's still hasn't changed the U.S. debt rating is a joke. They threatened with the government spending impasse. They were threatening, oh yeah, we'll downgrade them. But if S&P and Fitch have already downgraded, the U.S. is essentially no longer AAA. So it really even shouldn't be AA, whatever, minus, or whatever the hell it is. The U.S. has no fiscal credibility right now. And again, the only reason it can get away with it is because it's still a reserve currency. And why is it the reserve currency? Because so many other countries are finding it easier to issue debt in dollars than it is in their own currency. So everyone has US dollar obligations, which they have to service. So they need to buy dollars to service their debt. And this is what I'm saying. There's all these little steps. So as countries try and move away from dollar dependency, they'll try and issue debt in other currencies. They'll try and get trade agreements to net in other than US dollars. The more the global economy weans itself off dollars, the more vulnerable the dollar is for a collapse. And so I said, the U.S. can keep abusing its credit score and issuing crap loads of debt. They have no intention of paying back or any kind of sense of responsibility. At some point, it'll bite them in the ass, but it's not yet, because it takes a long time for all these obligations in U.S. dollars to be transferred to something else, if they can be at all. And that's the other thing is, like, so yeah, the Fed wants to keep interest rates high. And that'll just keep the U.S. dollar relatively firm. Higher interest rates and a strong dollar is not good for global debtors. At some point, you'll have a global debt crisis. And we almost got there back in November 2022 when the DXY was at 114. You saw the UN and the World Bank and the IMF all complaining about higher interest rates. And, you know, that was a year ago, and the Fed has kept raising rates and kept, you know, higher for longer. So how come we haven't seen a global debt crisis? Well, it's because, you know, DXY went from 114 down to 104 or whatever. But it's not going to go lower. The DXY, the U.S. dollar index, is not going to go lower. So at some point, it's going to blow up the world's financial system if the dollar doesn't collapse. You know, so you take your pick. You can have high inflation, or you can have a strong dollar strong dollar will basically cause a global debt crisis, which will collapse the world economy, or you'll have higher inflation, will basically create extreme volatility in everything and basically corrupts the economy through lack of confidence in financial markets. You have no idea where interest rates are going to go. Inflation, you don't know how, hyperinflation globally. What do? You're going to have a paralysis. So as I said, it's really hard for me to be optimistic. So I don't see a win scenario here in terms of it. Just is the least bad scenario, and the U.S. is not clear on how it wants to go about it.
No, and like one of the things I'm nervous about, because I've watched a couple of these, House hearings and things like that, and when they've talked about the debt, they're like, it's not a big deal because one of the things we can do, and I'm nervous that this is what they're thinking, is when it gets so bad, we'll just print and buy it ourselves. And basically, well, okay, then you print, you buy it yourselves, but now you're gonna have to finance what you bought and how much you spent on top of it on a higher interest rate. So you're basically just getting a higher interest rate to credit card to keep doing that, and then again you're delaying it, but now you're making it so much worse.
Exactly, and I said at some point that road hits a cliff or it hits a wall, and you're going to fall off the cliff or you're going to have the wall smack the thing in your face. So, yeah, they're talking about whatever $1 trillion coin or whatever the hell. It's like, I'm at the point now where nothing would surprise me. It's just you really are at a point where the global reset is really the only way to make that makes sense to me, just because there's so many things that are so screwed up. The problem is that there's no guarantee that the new system will be any better. And the problem is, a lot of people point out, if it's a digital reset and we go to a digital world, then basically we talked about this before. It's like the social engineering aspects of that are very frightening. And you can see it in China already with social credit scores. If you don't have a good credit score, you can't pay by Interac or whatever. You can't do half of things people do. You can't get on a train. You can't So I don't want to go the way of China, but Soros and Klaus would love us to have that way, where they can control every aspect of our lives. And quite frankly, I'm not a big fan of that. So I'm really kind of mixed as to what is the right way to go. I do think a global reset has to happen because there's just too many issues, but the tempting way to do that is go digital, and then that leads us up to being, mass controlled.
I think I lost it, Pete.
Yeah, it's
no, you're good. But yeah, and that's the thing, and you know what's messed up about this? And I always sit there and say, when is enough, Pete, for people to go, we're doing all of this just so politicians can keep stealing and being criminals, so bankers can keep stealing and being criminals. At what point do people, if it goes to let's start printing $1 trillion coin, well, what the hell's that solve? Now you're just making more inflation to again just buy bonds. You're Japan.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wasn't sure if it was you or someone else on an X basically posted, so Kenny's going to have $1 billion house or whatever property.
It's $1 billion house.
Who needs that? And here's my thing. It's I always thought if I had $1 billion, I could be like Bill Gates and buy farmland in random spots. Well, what the hell is that going to do? So at least if it's being out really, at least it's Kenny's spending on himself. I can sort of, from a glutton point of view, I can see that. But again, what the hell do you need so much space for, Kenny? Are you going to build a hidden volcano base and launch your rock? I know, it's what are you doing? At least Jeff Bezos, it's all about his ego. But yeah, Kenny, Kenny's ego too, I guess. But what are you doing? So at some point, people are going to go, that land could be better used to grow food, or what? So at some point, if everyone is suffering, but there's Kenny sitting in his $1 billion estate. Yeah, someone's. I don't care how big a security force he has. At some point, something's going to unfortunately happen to people like that. So this is a problem when this one, history shows. If again, I'm thinking about Rome. I always so that meme is kind of ridiculous for me. But if you look what happened with the end of the Roman Republic, I mean, Caesar was an opportunist. He wasn't a people guy. His father was, his uncle was. Basically an aristocrat that was in part of the civil war against Sulla. So his family lost against Sulla, but they were well off. So Caesar had to basically build himself out from the ground up, but he was always of the noble class. But he saw an opportunity to exploit the anger of the common people, the plebes, against the Senate, the rich landowners. So ultimately, what happened was the Caesar taking power was a civil war, using the power of the plebes. Because a lot of the people like join the army. I'm joining the army because Caesar's going to make me rich and I can have a piece of land. So Caesar won the populace support and the support of the legions because he was promising them some sort of payback against the Senate. And so Augustus, who's like Caesar's heir, is basically what they did is they basically did a hit list of here's 100 people that we don't like, and we're going to go take them out, execute them, and take their property. Again, it wasn't like the common people, because Augustus then basically said, like, Caesar's will says I need to give you guys money. So Augustus justified everything he did because, like, I'm trying to benefit the common man. So I think what I'm saying is history has shown that when the imbalance gets too high in favor of the 1%ers, something or someone basically uses that as a catalyst to rectify things. And so you get one elitist replaced by another elitist, which is of course what happened. Augustus became emperor, and was he any better than the Senate, like the landowners? It's debatable. I mean, I can't ask the guy that was in 30 AD. It's like, hey, is your life better than it was 20 years ago? I don't know. But the fact is that, like, when you get to these power imbalances, something will happen. And I think that's U.S. is getting to that point where you're seeing all these rich politicians, and as I said, I think there's some politicians that are going to exploit this because they see how much anger is at these Patrick McHenry's types that are quite obviously, like, being influenced by money to make decisions on behalf of the 1%.
No, I agree. And I mean, that's the thing. Like, one of the things I was telling people, to do is, I mean, I can't say I'm telling them to do it, but one of the things that, I went out, I got land in a house in a town. It was a township forever. Like, it's insanely small, but it just became a town technically this year. So it's going to develop, and it's like that's going to end up being worth more than a lot of these things people are going to be getting into, or the dollar itself. We found out with, like, FTX, JP Morgan, all these guys, they're just spoofing all these commodities because they know the true value should be 50, threefold what it is right now. It's just a joke.
Yeah.
But, I want to move on to something here real quick with JP Morgan because this article just came out a couple days ago here, but
sure.
it actually just came out yesterday. But JP Morgan Chase, I'm going to read a little bit here and I'll just get your question here. But JP Morgan Chase paid $1 billion in legal expenses in the last 6 months. It's still battling hundreds of charges and legal proceedings on 3 continents, hundreds of them. If you go down, you can come down and actually click on this link, everybody. You'll start seeing everything they're doing. But I just want to read one thing off here real quick in this thing, and then I'm going to post this for everybody to read. But like I said, they're a criminal thing. It talks about the mafia and things like that. But so talks about how, according to regulators, JP Morgan is the riskiest bank in the United States. 2 trial lawyers, have written a fact-intensive book describing how the bank resembles the Gambino crime family and how it's associated with, we'll get into this later down the thing, but it talks about how they're associated with, as me and you talked about before, a long time ago, they're actually associated with a ton of mafia members. But it also talks about how the bank's admission to five crime felonies, so 5 felony crimes, and not even including, Jeffrey Epstein and all this stuff. But these guys in the last, just want to read you this number and just get your thoughts on this. In the last 2.5 months, they have spent $665 million on legal expenses. That's just talking about lawyer fees and things like that. That's not even talking about the fines of the billion plus. How, at what point do people look at this thing and say, these guys are beyond criminal? They're paying billions by the month in criminal activities. I already showed people they're at 275 acceptance waiver and consents. They actually have felony crimes. Nobody's going to jail. At what point is the number too high?
Well, and that's the problem, is like, it sounds huge to us, but in the banking scheme, it's still like, again, when you're talking about how many trillions need to be rolled, it's like, it's just $1 billion here. And that's the problem. It's like, it, you know, the common person, like if they have too many different worries and they don't have the energy to focus on how absurd like this is. I can say like my cynical reaction to when you're running me the numbers is like, if I want job security, I should be a bank lawyer. I mean, it's like there's not going to change, right? It's not going to get any work. Like they're going to keep spending money on they, as long as it's profitable. And we've talked about this. If you get fined a small percentage of what you're actually taking, and then the legal fees are a small percentage as well. It's like, yeah, $1 billion in legal fees, but how many tens of billions have been taking to even get fined for that, right? And I don't even like the Epstein stuff. I don't even know whether that was a effective business for them. That is the problem. Is like, why was J.P. Morgan involved with him for so long?
Because 1.1 billion in deposits. Think about what they can do with 1.1 billion in customer deposits. How much can they rehypothecate that for?
Yeah, so you got to wonder. I mean, if they paid $300 million to Virgin Islands, plus how much in legal fees, and so that was a particularly expensive investment for them. But the thing is, there's people in this bank that make these amoral decisions and say, yeah, like we're totally destroying people's livelihoods, and it's like, but that doesn't matter. It's like, what are the money? Like they're just totally money oriented. They don't have the human capacity that they have no empathy. They have. Like it's all about numbers. It's like, what is the cost adjusted benefit of this? Like, what is the legal cost of screwing over these people and perhaps getting caught 20 years from now? It's the same mentality that you see in a hedge fund trader. It's like, you know what? I shouldn't do this. It's illegal, but the chances of me getting caught are about 10%. Well, maybe even 5% because Gary Gensler doesn't have enough money. So, okay, I'm going to do this because the 90% upside is huge. And even though if I do this, it will ruin people's lives, I don't care because I'm all about for my money, for me. And so I'm not going to be in here for 5 years. I'll be somewhere totally unrelated because there's no consequences for me running away. So, yeah, I mean, they just do it. And that's the thing. The banks do it on even bigger scale. It's like, and I mean, some companies, like you look at some of the I don't even want to get into the pharmaceuticals, but like okay, well, let's get into pharmaceuticals. It's like, we're going to put this vaccine out here. We haven't really tested it, but we've got these huge government contracts for billions and billions of dollars. There's a possibility that these will cause significant side effects that we're not aware of yet, but what the hell, we'll do it. And then we'll just, pay the politicians and whatever expenses we think we might need to cover down the road. But it's, better to take the $2 billion to $3 billion now and pay the $500 million expected cost later. And the PR hits for these guys never seem to matter, right? It's like Pfizer gets caught doing all this shit, or Moderna or whoever, and the CFO leaves after selling his stock, and they wind up 5 years later doing the same thing again. It's like there's like Monsanto is the guy's like food agriculture. Who knows what they're doing in the food supply, but like does it matter? No, they still keep doing it. And that's something the banks will have the same mentality. It's like, what, we can get away with it. It's just the cost of doing business. It's totally immoral. We shouldn't be doing it from a human ethics point of view. We shouldn't be doing this, but we'll do it anyway because it makes money. And that, if I had one thing to say about I didn't see a lot of that in my banking experience because it was all about FX. And, there was the money laundering issue that I had to take courses every year, but I never I never had to see that kind of seediness. Like I didn't see the bank, like pricing FX and trading FX, I didn't get to see how that would have impact anyone. I didn't see moral impact for my decisions. But like, there's some people in some banks that like what they're doing is clearly wrong, and yet they still do it. And that is kind of disgusting. And I mean, Credit Suisse is the prime example of that. It's like I started calling them out about 2 years ago, not just because they were shorting AMC. It was just it was how many scandals can you have in a row before it's too much. And so Credit Suisse is the poster boy, but I mean, they're not like Deutsche Bank is just as bad in some respect. UBS is probably just like I don't know if you watched the latest Prime on the John Wick universe, but there's two brothers, and of course the younger brother is the guy that runs the hotel. But so the older brother is this like rough and tumble soldier, and the younger guy that takes over the hotel eventually is this preppy rich guy. And so I look at UBS being the preppy rich guy, and Credit Suisse being the older, rougher guy. I mean, reality is they're bankers, but I'm just trying to, make an analogy. It's just they're all corrupt. It's just some are more corrupt than others, and some are more blasé about how corrupt they are. I'll just point out one thing. Someone was asking me on X a few days ago about Scotia being involved in the gold business, and of course, we know that JP Morgan has been fined over $900 million for manipulating the gold and silver markets, and 3 other traders were jailed this year for wire fraud and spoofing. Scotia basically left the gold business because of the obligations, the legal obligations, the legal liabilities they felt they were incurring by being in that business. So as far as again, Canadian banks are supposedly not as bad as other foreign banks. Yeah, they have their moments, and so Scotia was basically involved in the gold and silver manipulation trade as well. And they got out because they didn't want to face the legal ramifications of it. Did I lose you, Biggums?
No, I thought I lost you. Like you were still going, and it just cut out.
Oh, okay. I have no idea where I got cut off. That I was rambling about Scotia McLeod.
No, that's one of the last couple things I heard, and all of a sudden you just kind of stopped. I was like, okay.
I was just like going, oh, it's quiet. I put Biggums to sleep, or Murphy snoozing.
I'm always listening. I'm just reading other stuff too to go over next because this next thing I wanted, because I only got a little bit here. I only got about 10, 15 more minutes here, but what I want to get into next year real quick, just because I think this actually is a pretty big deal here. Is last week JP Morgan debuted its tokenization platform, and BlackRock is already involved in it. And we already know, the fucking corruption over there with those two. But basically, they found out about people not liking CBDC type things, and all they did was basically just rebranded into these tokens. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, in insofar as you look at what happened in the crypto space, and FTX and all those guys are basically did the perfect dry run for the banks. And I think sorry, I'm going to sidetrack a little bit. So the interesting story that came out early this week or late last week was, Do Kwon basically saying that he felt Citadel was the one that caused Terra to be decoupled from its peg, and outright blaming Ken Griffin's Citadel for it. And of course, what happened when it happened in whatever July 2022, the initial scuttlebutt was it was Citadel and BlackRock that did it. So the funny thing for me is Do Kwon only signaled out Citadel. They didn't signal out BlackRock. But I do think that both of those firms are basically looking at what's going on in the crypto space and using that as sort of a blueprint for what to do and what not to do. But yeah, it's basically taking the better parts of what happened in the crypto space and adapting it to their own needs. And ultimately, I do think that they're the Wild West of the crypto world. And you could argue that this is where maybe Gensler is basically being, directed to go after crypto on behalf of BlackRock and stuff. I mean, I don't have any proof of that, but that's sort of, if you wanted to see that kind of connection, it's not hard to draw the lines. So, Gary is got a crypto background. Gary knew FTX, so it's like these. Again, it could have been just like SBF was basically a loose dog. Basically said, okay, go play with this concept, and we'll watch you and go from there. So I think what they're doing is probably just adapting what they learned, and as you said, maybe a front for not a digital currency, but something that could be just as similar. And a lot of people talk about XRP, and I'm not an expert in XRP, so I don't want to go into it. But a lot of people saying that XRP could be a payment transfer system that would replace a digital currency.
Yeah, and I'm nervous because these seem like they're basically wholesale CBDCs.
Yeah, and that's possibly what they are.
Last couple of things here I want to go over. I just saw this on Twitter, and it was kind of really interesting. I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts are. So, baby, hold on, please. So there was in the FTX claims, one of the claims actually was for, I'm pulling the screen here, It's from Blockfolio Inc. and their actually claim for towards FTX is for 1.7 trillion. What are your thoughts on that? Because the thing right under it is the IRS at 20 billion.
Yeah, yeah. I have no idea. I haven't done enough reading on it to have any kind of clue, but the number is like astronomical, right? So, yeah. Um, again, it's one of those things where you could tell me that at this point I wouldn't be surprised if aliens were controlling. I'm at that point now where, like, I was thinking to myself before we started this space call or this call. I'm feeling exhausted, and it's like when I was younger, like market black swan events, like they were very, very rare, but usually like you'd have something in a cycle that would blow up, like, oh, it's October, some market crash is going to happen, okay, and there's a crisis, and something like 9/11 happened and the market was shut down for a week or two, but or the flash crash happened in 2010. Within a week everything was sort of back to normal. This thing has been one since before COVID, but even worse since COVID. And it's like I'm like constant, like as a news junkie, I'm burned out. And my receptors are like, as I said, that headline about Canadian universal income. It's like normally that would freak me out. It's like, oh my god, but I don't even have time and energy to look into it because there's one thing after another every day. So this thing about the Gaza Strip, it's like Hamas going on in this. The question is, well, what is Hamas doing this differently this time that they, it's like, oh, they're trying to scuttle the Israeli-Saudi Arabia normalization. Okay, but they know that this is going to prompt a response from Israel, and of course it has. And anyway, it's just like this would be a once-in-a-decade event, but we have like multiple once-in-a-decade events happening in the same year. It's like, so yeah, like 1.7 trillion. Yeah, okay. I don't know. It's just, I'm not shocked anymore. I just don't know what to and again, so much fake information out there. I'm sort of hesitant in believing anything at the moment until I get multiple verification. So I guess that's my comment on that.
Yeah, I suppose I should look for a couple more, but I was like, it looks pretty legit here. But yeah, I'm like 1.7 trillion. That doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
And then one of the things I want to talk with you. So yesterday there was there was insane amount of stocks that were halted on the UK London, and they said they'll look into it. And this is what always happens when things like this happen. They're not going to end up giving out an explanation at all. They're just going to hope everybody kind of forgets about it. And then so what are your thoughts on what happened? And
again, this is one of these things I haven't had time to look into, and I honestly don't have a clue. All I can tell you is it's very unusual, and yet it was not every stock. There were some minor sub exchanges that were still trading, but yeah, like the main exchange was halted. No explanation given, and will we ever get one? I don't know. Maybe it's a terrorist event. You never know. I don't know. It's like anything's possible. I mean, the one thing that has surprised me was that, like, in I think not GoldenEye. Well, GoldenEye sort of touched on it, but one of the other James Bonds, was it his first? Yeah, it was the one where James Bond is going through an airport trying to prevent. They were short selling. I don't know, short selling the airlines, but the financial terrorism aspect. It's like causing an event and then benefiting, like causing a financial crisis and benefiting it because it's funding your terrorism. It's like that's the sort of thing I'm surprised we haven't seen more of. So when I see something like the UK halted, it's like, well, what could it have been? And we had some multiple hacks. We had M being hacked, so I start to wonder, okay, was it, were they hacked or something like that? So I guess, yeah, GoldenEye is the one where they're talking about taking down the financial system. So I start to wonder in a terror world of the future, it's not so much hijacking an airline or something, it's hijacking an exchange. So that's sort of where my thoughts went on that.
Well, it's funny you say something like that too, because like Klaus and all those trash, they've all been talking about a cyber attack, and it's like that's the one of the things I've always been worried about. It's like, okay, well, if worse comes to worse, but it's like there's so many things. If you went in an exchange, there should be so many records and backup records here and there, but there won't be. They'll have excuses why there wasn't.
There was, but it was in a facility in Illinois, and it got burned down. Sorry.
It was in Building 7, and suddenly it
Yeah,
collapsed.
yeah, no, exactly.
But yeah, I just showed everybody on the screen too all those stocks that halted. It was hundreds and hundreds of stocks, but it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, they'll never give us an explanation. So I just wanted people or get your thoughts on what you thought might have happened there, because I expect something that like that maybe to happen again down the
It,
line.
it, it's just the fact that what happened with so Caesars paid 15 million to avoid being hacked, and then MGN didn't, and got, like, as far as I know, they still haven't got everything up to normal. So, and that's a pretty huge hack for, like, to go after a casino. That's Ocean's 14, or, like, yeah, I guess Ocean's 14 would be the next one, or Ocean's 15, because they had that FEMA one. So that's that kind of level. If you're going to go after a casino network, I mean, what else can you go after? I mean, if you want to go after a monetary thing, exchange would be the next step up for a casino chain, right? So that's where my mind went. It had to be some sort of external or internal hacking issue.
Yeah. So this, I want to get just two more things here. The Canada, they're talking about doing the universal income, and one of the things that I thought about all this was super funny is they're talking about, it's basically socialism, because they're talking about being socialist when they sit there for the last all these years. Oh, we hate this, and you're seeing this all around the world now. So everyone's, oh man, socialism's bad, and then when it suddenly comes to, all right, well, we're gonna give you guys a certain amount of money, but the funny thing is even when you read into this universal income, it's like not CEOs and stuff. It's not stuff like that. They're still gonna make their giant amount of money. It's just the rest of us, they kind of take away from this guy and this guy to give it to this guy. So it's like it's socialism just between us, though. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it basically means that keeping up with the Joneses mean that everyone will be the Joneses, but the Joneses won't have a two-car garage and three cars or whatever. It'll be basically you have one car garage with one car, and so everyone will basically be the same, but we'll have less. That's how I look at it. So that it's not as bad as, oh, I'm going to be in a cardboard box with my VR set, but it'll be like everyone will have 2 vacation weeks a year, and you will basically be able to afford going to Cancun, or you can go to Disneyland, but that'll be your one vacation for the year. It'll be very boring, is what I think, because basically everyone will be mandated to have a certain lifestyle, and that'll be the problem. It's like, well, if you want to have a different lifestyle, it'll be very hard to make. It'll be basically like, you have to, who do you have to kill to get into the 1%? So, and that's my theory, is the universal income will basically make us all very comfortable enough not to be worried about food, but not having a particularly exciting life, unless you live it through VR. So in a sense, a lot of those dystopian things about like being glued to your headset, maybe that's how they'll basically control us, is basically just like, yeah, your life's boring, but you have the internet to play with. So I hope AMC has a place for that in that future. But yeah, it's like, that's my concern, is like universal income will basically make us all poorer, but at least we'll be as poor as everyone else, except for those bastards in Washington and Ottawa.
On top of that, sorry, that's funny. On top of that, the thing that makes me nervous about it is we already talk about innovation going down and things like that, and it's like, well, what is people's motivation to go to the extra schooling to do these other jobs if they're not going to make that much more compared, so it's like it makes people not want to go. What's the point of college at that point?
Well, exactly. I think what'll happen is it'll be, again, I'm going kind of dystopian nightmarish, but they'll have, like, the government will provide testing to see who's got the kind of aptitude to excel. So they will basically encourage, like, they'll do tests and say, oh, your genetics suggests that you were going to be a great violin player. So we'll basically provide support for you to become a violin player, or you're going to be the next. Again, it feels very like communist. Like, yeah, you can be a great baseball player. We're going to, like, train you to be a baseball player. So only people that have the right genetic markings or whatever can succeed in certain things, and they'll be encouraged to excel. But most of us, like, oh, you're pretty average genetics. There's nothing exceptional about you, but you have your 30 years and then we'll kill you off. I don't know. It's like it feels. Yeah, I don't know. I think they'll have like some vent for somebody that wants to be exceptional. They'll provide some way of doing that. But for most of us, it's like, yeah, like, just be comfortable with what you have, and that's kind of a really really boring future. But that's, like, a lot of science fiction tends to look at things like that. So. I'll give you an example, like Andor. Again, I don't know how many people watch Disney Plus. Andor is probably one of the best Star Wars shows that's come out in the post Disney acquisition. But they have a scene where they're on Coruscant, which is the capital, and this guy who's working for the Empire, he's in this like huge room doing data entry, and it's like, hundreds and hundreds of these little cubicles in this huge room. It's like, yeah, that's our life. It's like, if you got a job, it'll be boring like that. No particular excitement to it. So that's my concern is like universal income, create a world like that where you're not unhappy, but you're joyless, and that's my biggest concern, is where we're going.
No, I mean, I agree on a lot of this. And that's what I'm saying. At some point, it's like people, when is enough enough? When are they going to stand up and say, this is ridiculous? Because it's like around the entire world. It's everywhere. Yeah. It's just disgusting. These guys make sure that they're always in power. And to lead you on to the point of these short sellers and all that stuff, it's dumb, because it's like you talked about with pharmaceutical, there could be cures for cancer. There is cures for disease, but there's not profit in a $20 shot compared to giving you $1,000 radiation, hundreds of thousands in the United States. And it's just pathetic that people, like I said, when you're spending $16 trillion, everybody's way of life should have improved at that point, not got drastically worse, but just for some it got amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And that's the biggest problem, is like all that money, and who benefited? Very small percentage. Like there's so many movies that used to target like the energy complex. It's like, oh, this guy has a formula for free energy. It's like, oh, well, we got to kill him off and buy the formula or whatever. And so there's a plant in LA that's doing fusion experiments, and they've actually been able to supposedly create an experiment that generates free energy. But I haven't heard much about it. But that's the thing. It's like, if that company ever went public, it would be probably shorted to death, right? So that's the problem. It's like there should be, there should be a way for good things to actually benefit mankind, as opposed to the market's not free. It's designed to strangle that innovation. And you're talking about, there's no innovation in the U.S. because a lot of it's been strangled. And I mean, the U.S. still has innovation, but it could be a lot better. So.
Well, yeah, and the problem is, it's like you killed competition, because anytime that somebody's going to come out, like you said, you just short it to death, take the company over, and you own the patent, and then you just bury the patent. And it's like, think of how many hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars are in patents that worth of innovation that just sits in a safe that they own. And then what happens is they don't want to change their business model, because it's working, it's running, they own everything. So what they'll do is when something finally kind of dries up, they'll take one of their patents out of their safes and be like, oh, it's an innovation breakthrough that somebody else made 20 years ago that we took.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just dumb it down to like something we can all understand. It's like simple. So Burger King, I don't know if people actually like Burger King, but it used to be that they had a decent food. But what happened was they got bought out by an investment company called Yum Brands, and he basically goes in there, and the whole thing was to standardize everything. They hired people from McDonald's to try and do that, but the problem was that they focused so much on cost cutting that the franchise owners of Burger King don't have an incentive to do much. They basically been neutered. They don't have any creative like decision making, and so they have these crappy products, and they do not have any, like, if you look at the performance of Burger King over the last 20 years since Yum Brands brought them out. The Yum Brands has done well by squeezing the life out of the brand. The actual Burger King is like a dying franchise, and that's what I'm saying is like it's exactly it. They're just stifling any, like, I haven't been to Burger King in years because the food sucks now, but the food used to be okay. And I mean, you could say a lot of the fast food chains that are owned by these sort of investment private bank, venture capital firms, they basically buy these companies and squeeze the creative juice out of them it becomes boring. It becomes really dull, and the food becomes monotonous. And there's no no improvement except for like again. Sorry, I was talking about McDonald's earlier this week, and I said, look, McDonald's used to taste a lot better. Then they decided they're going to make these pre-cook the burgers, put them in these plastic bins, and then they take them out of the trays when they need to make a burger. But meanwhile, it's been sitting in that plastic tray. It's been pre-cooked. It tastes like shit. And fast food was a growing industry because it was cheap, but it actually tasted good. Now it's just like it's not even cheap and it tastes like crap. So if I was to short companies, I'd actually be shorting fast food companies, at least some of them. So that's the problem with, again,
like the most affordable thing's the problem. Going to the grocery store now for one meal costs almost as much as fast food.
Oh yeah. Now that leads me. I wasn't going to go into it because I have been triggered by some. Wall Street Silver had this TikTok video earlier in the week. Some stupid woman in Ontario complaining about Loblaws and how she couldn't get a salad for less than $15. And then she's talking about pork being like expensive. She hadn't had meat for weeks and said, oh, this pork chop would be cost me $25, so $40. And she winds up just buying a $3 bottle of water, which is like, well, why didn't you take tap water? Anyway, the fact is I've been on this thing. It's like, I know I can shop affordably and so you can actually eat okay if you take the time to know where the specials are. But yeah, like people get lazy and they go to food restaurants, but even in Canada now, like my issue is there's all the fast food restaurants that are near me, like the chains, they got closed because of COVID, and so they all went to this model where they're basically like this in a parking lot where they're servicing you Uber Eats or DoorDash. So you can't really even go walk to the places downtown anymore because they're taken over by these auto feeds for the delivery guys. And so I look at it like a quarter pounder with a medium fries and a medium Coke costs $12.89 or something. It's like $13 for a burger and fries. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. So you can't even go to the store and like in-house store because there's none downtown anymore. So I'd rather go grocery shopping anyway. I'm not going to pay $13 for a quarter pounder. And so I'm able to find meats on sale like for $6-7. Like I had actually I was there this morning before the call. 2 pieces of salmon, normally $10. It's on sale for $5 because it's you got a few days before you got to cook it. But it's like people say, oh, like some guy today on Twitter say, oh, you're going to get sick off that. It's like these are major chains. People, they discount these prices every day. It's like they have milk that's on sale, goes 50% off when it's got less than a week, but expiry dates are only tentative anyway. It's like, if you consume the stuff right away, you can eat very well. It's like, you can shop around, you can find discounts. I would rather go to grocery stores than pay $12.59 for a quarter pounder, which is going to be cold by the time the delivery guy gets. Oh, and that's before all the delivery fees and taxes. So I rarely even want to look at Uber Eats anymore because it's so expensive. So, but yeah, this stupid woman in Ontario is like, I swear this TikTok was just to get clicks because it's like, yeah, you can go to a grocery store and get meat and salad for less than $40. Sorry, girl. Anyway, that's my rant.
I know, but like, I don't use Uber Eats. If I'm gonna go, I just go there, and I'm not paying $13 for a burger. But I hear you. I went to a Cordon Bleu, so I never really go there. But I mean,
yeah, I
see it all the time. If I can see it, it's like $7-9. My wife does it. She'll go all the time for lunches and stuff and come home. But it's like, I'm just saying, it's pretty damn close with inflation at this point. Where if you find the right place, they're about the same.
And that's the thing. There are, like, again, I'm generalizing. There are some fast food chains that still have quality food, but the ones that are run by, say, Yum brands like KFC and Burger King, their quality has suffered. I definitely, I grew up on this stuff, and I know that it tastes a lot different than it does, in the past.
Oh yeah, now they just add more preservatives to everything. But,
exactly.
I gotta get going here, though. I gotta get back up to work too.
All
Thank
right.
you for stopping by. I appreciate it. We haven't done this for a while, so it was nice talking to you.
Absolutely, sir. And I will talk to you later.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Goodbye.